So it's not as, you don't get caught doing it as much.
Right.
Usually took like the month of January, sometimes into February before I remembered.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. We are live on YouTube. Tweet out the link. Boom. Get on here. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on Hawk Fanatic, recording on Thursday, January the 5th, a little after 9 a.m. Central Time. Joined as always by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. I am Rob Howe, and this is your weekly Hawkeye rundown. And we've got a lot to run down, Scott. January used to be a little more quiet. We had some NFL guys announced coming back, going. Now it's very active, and we had an active week, and I would expect an active rest of the month.
I'm there with you, Rob. I think right now it's, it used to be the structure of the season, and we talked about it before, where it used to be with football season ending before Thanksgiving, that it just, okay, there was a little bit of a break. Then there were some visits for football in December, and some commits, but really it was pretty minor as compared to this. And then basketball season took over. You had your bowl, and then you had, NFL decisions, maybe a few late recruits, but overall there was some structure to it. Since early December, I mean, this has been the wild, wild west. It is chaotic. I mean, granted, it's been good for business, I think, for everybody, but it's also been, really, really wild times. And I think there needs to be some structure applied in the future in pretty much every area, but I think in this one in particular, because you're going to really start to burn some people out.
Yeah, and we'll discuss this on a lot of different levels from, obviously Iowa's roster management and, movement there to NIL, which was part of last week's discussion, and just different layers to this as well. It's been so busy, I haven't been able to get my hair cut. That's why I'm wearing a hat, because my hair is crazy right now. So, but I plan to get out and get a haircut, even if it's funny because I'll leave the house to go for a walk or go to the store, and then I'm like, oh, crap, somebody's coming back and somebody's leaving and somebody's visiting. It's just kind of been like that this week, but we won't talk a ton about the Music City Bowl, Scott, because we're, going on a week removed from that, but we should probably start there. Good sign for Iowa and the program. I thought that was my takeaway. I don't know how much football takeaway you could have in that game. And we talked about that last week when we previewed it, just guys sitting out, quarterbacks that hadn't played before, pretty good defenses on both sides would probably dominate, and they did. I think we probably saw things offensively that we have been seeing for the past 2 years in terms of not being able to run the football, things like that I think it was obvious before the game needed to be fixed going into next season. But for me, the biggest takeaway, you look at a program and for whether it's got good chemistry, whether it's got a good culture, whether it's invested. And I think we saw that from Iowa. And that's really, for me, that's what I think was most important.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, and I saw it, in the lead up, you can kind of tell when players are invested and when they want to be there or they don't. And when you have kind of the leadership structure that they had with Jack Campbell and Sam Laporta in particular, hey, they could have walked away at any time and nobody would have blamed them. I mean, hey, we've done enough here. We're going to start working on the NFL. Sam Laporta having meniscus surgery after, hurting his knee in Minnesota in late November. Yet, hey, I want to play with my boys one more time. And even losing two quarterbacks and going to number 3, who'd never taken a snap in a game before, you saw a committed effort. You saw a team that was invested. The players wanted to play and wanted to play well and play hard and play for their coach, play for each other. And so I knew that they were going to have a pretty good effort, at least, and especially on defense. I didn't think that there would be too many issues, and there certainly were not. First shutout for a Big Ten team in a bowl game since 1999, first time ever over an SEC team in a bowl game. So I think this said a lot about everything that you mentioned, Rob, and there's certainly a lot of questions going forward. We all have them, staff, scheme, especially on an offensive side of the ball, personnel. But if you want to know if your team is or your players are behind the coach and believe in the coach and believe in the system, they certainly do. I mean, they're there. I mean, they've had some opt-outs, the ones that probably didn't, and that's fair. It's fair for them and it's fair for Iowa. But I think overall, the ones that played in this game and stuck around, I think you saw a team that's really all in on being Iowa players now into the future.
Yeah, and the opt-out thing is another kind of, part of this discussion. Is there a way that the bowl system can entice guys to play monetarily, make it worth their while, whether it be a Will Levis, that's a huge absence. Rodriguez too, but you're talking about a first round top 10 type quarterback not playing in a game. That's huge for your game. So what can you do to make that happen? We don't have to go too far into those weeds, but I don't have a problem with what Kayvon did, and I don't have an issue with what Sam Laporta did coming off an injury, because that to me was the one where that opened my eyes. Guys coming off meniscus repair and he's playing in the game, and then they're putting him at Wildcat quarterback or whatever the hell that was. That didn't work. And, I'm sure he was all in on that, doing that. But I don't have a problem with any of those guys. I mean, it's up to the individual, and until the bowls, and I think they're going to be forced, probably their hand's going to be forced, I think, once the football playoff expands to incentivize guys playing in these games. You're going to have more guys opting out.
I wrote about this before the first bowl game. I did kind of a big picture look at the bowls and what the future is beyond the playoff. And you're exactly right. That's some of the areas that they are discussing, that they need to discuss with the commissioners. They need to discuss with each other is, how do you make bowls relevant when they're already, kind of fading in relevance as they are? I mean, the playoff is going to consume a lot of the bandwidth, and rightly so. I mean, you're talking about the 12 best teams, and you're talking about, something tangible at stake, a national championship. And so what do you make of the Music City Bowl or the Birmingham Bowl or whatever? Well, people will watch their bowl games. I mean, almost 3 million people watched the Music City Bowl, and it was, head up with the sugar, and it was, kind of leading into 2 massive games. So that's a really good number. That's not a number that you get for college basketball. I mean, only one college basketball regular season game last year had more than that, and that was Coach K's finale. So, they're always going to have something, but how do you keep the players, incentivize the players to play? For Will Levis, I'd say none, zero. There is nothing you can do short of 7 figures to make him stay in that game, because him against Iowa's defense would have been a bad proposition. The only way that Kentucky even stayed, I won't even say stayed in the game, they were terrible offensively, but the only thing that prevented them from getting sacked 8 times was the fact that their quarterback was a runner, and he could kind of move around a little bit, but, he threw 2 pick sixes. Will Levis probably wouldn't have thrown 2 pick sixes, but he would have been sacked 8 times, and he might have gotten hurt. Maybe he gets a high ankle sprain. Maybe, look at Tyler Linderbaum last year in the bowl game. So I just don't see those types of upper echelon players playing in bowl games. Playoffs, if you opt out of a playoff game, it's your ass, in my opinion. That's one where people will come at you unless you are hurt legitimately. But I think a bowl game, that's what it is. So one of the things that the guy who heads the bowl season, which used to be the College Bowl Association, told me is like, it's up to the bowls to kind of change its philosophy away from this is a conclusion to the season and more about a preview to the next, that you're going to get a chance to see, instead of Kayvon Merriweather, a second-team All-American, you see Xavier Wampa, or instead of seeing Spencer Petras, maybe you see Joey Lavis, although, Cade McNamara will be that guy. But that's the way you want to build it for the fans. you're not going to be able to recreate these games and turn them into something that they used to be or what you want them to be. But I think what you do is you create whatever, you spin it whatever way you can to make it look successful. And I'd say, in the case of losing Kayvon Merriweather, that was, okay, that's a shame, but he did what's best for him, and I don't think anybody begrudged him for it. But getting the chance to see Xavier Wampa was probably more exciting for fans in the beginning, and then of course what happened, it's really exciting. So I think that's probably where you got to go with bowl games right now.
Yeah, and we'll see. They've got a lot of time now to figure this out, just like Iowa has time to figure out what's going on offensively. So what we know so far, Scott, is that Iowa has added Cade McNamara, Eric All, and Seth Anderson since the last time we talked, has joined as well. So personnel-wise, they are addressing that. Walter Rouse from Stanford is visiting today and tomorrow. Then he goes to Nebraska. Stiff competition there for him. We'll see. I mean, it's going to be important, both from a selling point the next 2 days, both just on selling him on the program and then financially selling him. So it's kind of a double, there's a combination of things that will factor into his decision. So that'll be interesting, but it seems like Iowa is, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, that, I don't think Kirk Ferentz saw himself in this position 6 months ago, let alone 5-10 years ago. I think, when we met with him during when the announcement of the Swarm Collective, I think that was in August, I don't think he saw them being this involved with NIL and the transfer portal. But I think, to his credit, he realizes that he needs to be involved. You're at an extreme competitive disadvantage if you aren't involved. And the staff is identifying guys. The collective is working to help get them. And it's in a good spot right now, I think, but it still has work to do. They're still behind, and we still have the situation that we talked about last week. You guys met with Gary Barta on Friday. There's still some tension there with the athletic department and the collective. I'll let you roll on this, man. We can talk about personnel. We can talk about the setup, and the structure for Iowa. Where do you want to go?
I guess let's first talk about the personnel, because I do think that that's important, and I don't want to skip over that. I mean, we already knew about Eric All and Cade McNamara, a month ago or so, or close to it. Seth Anderson, for instance, is a huge pickup for Iowa because, and Nico Ragaini deciding to come back too. I mean, now you've got two, I think, legitimate starting caliber wide receivers, and I like Deontay Bynes too quite a bit. So I think they're gradually moving forward. You might need one more, but I think if you have to, that's the position where, okay, you have to stand pat, or you're not going to get your guy. I think you could survive that a little bit, although there's some more prospects out there. Offensive line is where you need to be. Walter Rouse, as you said, is the guy that they need to be all invested in and put on a good face, a good effort. This is where you need your new quarterback to be a part of it. No offense to Nebraska, but Nebraska still, even though it has great resources and a new coach and everything like that, and maybe a lot of optimism, Iowa's a better program. Yes, Iowa lost, but Iowa's won 8 games every year since 2014, which it only won 7 that year. So I think Iowa is really an offensive lineman or two short of competing and actually being the favorite in the West Division and being a competitive double-digit win program. So I think you really sell him on that. You sell them on Iowa's history at that position, that it's Stanford has a great tradition too, but I think Iowa, it ranks second right now since in the last 20 years, number of first round draft picks at that position. So you lean into that, you try to get that one done. Iowa is behind financially, not as far behind as they're farther behind than what they want to be, but not necessarily overall. I mean, they're at about $3 million right now, which is doable. for them to get what they need right now. And so, you can go get, and then, of course, yesterday they did get Deacon Hill, a quarterback, former Wisconsin quarterback who committed to Fordham on Christmas Day. And then, an Iowa offer came. But smart move. Iowa needed at least one more quarterback to come in spring football. I mean, you only had one quarterback really that we know of that's able to hand off the ball. So I think you need two at least. And, hey, he can, the opportunity's there. I'm sure up front they're like, hey, this is Cade McNamara's team right now, but, he's coming off an injury. And, we like Joey Labus, but we're committed to best player played after this. So I think you just roll with that. Now, big picture, Rob, dealing with NIL, dealing with athletics, dealing with this. Kirk and Fran are on the same page. They are completely invested. And I know a lot of people were very, very skeptical of Kirk. I think, rightly so, but Kirk is invested. I had a side conversation with him. It's either get off and move on with your life or coach through this era. And he's choosing to coach through this era. And that means picking up free agents. The athletic department has sent mixed messages for a while on how invested they're going to be. I mean, they did send out that video of Kirk last week at 10:38, in the morning, the day after I wrote my column and everything. And I still don't know that they don't see the sense of urgency, let's put it this way. And I think that they believe, or the higher ups believe, that the athletic department is more important than NIL. And I would say that it's 1A and 1B. It's not 1 and then 5. So that's the one where I think things have to change and have to change quickly, because I think football will persevere through this. I think football probably will get a good offensive lineman, maybe they want to get a corner, they want to get another receiver, maybe another offensive lineman. And I think they will. I think they'll be okay there. Basketball is going to be the one where they get killed. And as we've seen so far this year, if they had a post, maybe they'd survive a little bit more of this run. And I think it could be very challenging what they're facing, the rest of the way without having a post player that could have really helped them.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, it's affected basketball more than football at this point, because the basketball programs were farther ahead than football, I think, initially when NIL hit, because they're more used to dealing in this area illegally. But now that it's legal, they have kind of a head start. And not that football wasn't partaking in bagmen and side deals and all that other stuff. But it's hurt Iowa. And it was, Fran identified what he needed in the offseason and he didn't get it. And some of it was, other schools being involved and the guys having a choice of other good options. But Iowa really didn't have, couldn't really fight. It was one arm behind its back because of the NIL situation. So, we'll see what happens going forward there, because now if you have a rough season, then it makes it harder to recruit, so we'll see where that goes with that. But I'm just wondering at what point, there needs to be a good relationship between the athletic department and the collective, and there isn't one right now. And can it be repaired? And if it can't be repaired, what needs to happen to make it work? Because I'm not sure it works as well as it can work if there's animosity there. And it seems like there is right now.
I don't know that it could work. I don't know that it could work in a good way, in a way that it needs to, which is really be a partnership. That's what it really has to happen. And I would say at this point, no, that I don't think there's a lot of trust. I think that's probably the area that's been most eroded through the late fall and through the winter, is trust mutually. And that needs to change. And how does that change? Well, I don't know. I mean, the chairs need to change. Maybe that's really probably about as close to a way as the method to do that. So, I think what you got is, you've got a more of a reluctant athletic department that's kind of dipping its toe in the water and almost like, well, we'll see where this goes and we'll help you along the way. But and then you've got on the other side, it's like the fast pass at Disney World. It's like, we got to get going. You can't wait around. And I think their sense of urgency that the collective and the coaches feel is different than what the athletic department feels. That the athletic department is looking at it as, yeah, it's a little bit of a change, business as usual, but then you look over at the other side, it's like, you fall down. And I mean, I've mentioned this before here, is if you get if let's say Tisla goes to Wisconsin, and he catches a third down pass that extends a drive, and they win by a field goal, and they go to Indianapolis and they win 10 games, you win 9, because he got an extra $50K because their athletic department was more invested. That is the ultimate trickle down, trickle up theory that Iowa needs to really represent, because if maybe he's on their team, not only does he do that, but they win by 10. And then they go to Indianapolis and they're very competitive. Maybe they go to New Year's Six Bowl. And in basketball, what we saw, they lost to Wisconsin in overtime. They lost to Penn State by 4. Maybe that doesn't change anything with Nebraska or even Eastern Illinois, which they need to wear that wart for a while. But I think, it's the difference between going to the NCAA and the NIT. And as we know, that is a huge line. So I think I think this is where the coaches, people have talked about them running the athletic department. They've generally stayed in their lane. They've run their fiefdoms. I mean, Kirk runs football, no question, but he's never really overstepped to do the athletic department thing. It's just like, hey, give me my autonomy and I'll leave you alone. But I think him, Fran, Lisa to an extent, but mostly him and Fran need to really be forceful, or they need to make some changes. I do think that it might reach a tipping point in that area.
Yeah, I'll see. It's going to be an interesting spring, because this is an important time for building that collective going into next year. You can't stop. You have to keep going and keep building the war chest, for lack of a better term. So you're able to bring guys in, and Iowa's added 3 really nice pieces in areas of need on offense. We talked about offensive line still being in need, maybe linebacker, maybe cornerback. Talk about some personnel this week, Scott, or since the last time we talked. Carson May goes in, as you said. Deacon Hill comes out. So there's, I don't know. Maybe Carson May's the better player. Maybe Deacon Hill's the better player. We don't really know at this point. They were both going to be backup quarterbacks this year anyway. So I think that's for not knowing kind of what either one is capable of at this point at the college level. I think that's probably a fair trade, if we can put it in those terms.
Yeah.
Lucas Van Ness leaves. I was kind of wondering about that. And good move on his part. Wish him the best. He's ready. Could have benefited from a year back. We've seen both sides of this with Iowa, guys who come back, guys who go early. It's, again, kind of like the bowl, opt in, opt out. It's a personal decision, and you just wish the guy the best. And then Joe Evans coming back. So,
right.
A guy at the same position. So I think Iowa's okay so far, kind of what we've seen since the last time we talked last Thursday. Nothing out of the ordinary. We still have it sounds like John Wagner's going, and Seth Benson we don't know yet. Noah Shannon we don't know yet.
Yeah, Benson and Shannon are probably the 2 question marks, although Benson was strongly leading towards leaving. I think it would take us either I don't even know that NIL would be the main factor with that. He's been in the program for 5 years. He's pretty beat up. I mean, that way physically, and
very physical position. It takes it puts miles on your body.
He's been a starter for 3 years at a very high level. I don't know that if he comes back, he's going to increase his draft stock. I don't think he goes from a late rounder to a 4th or 3rd rounder because of something he did. It's really about, does he think that, hey, I have a short shelf life anyway in football. Do I want to do it for free or do it for, pro team. Do I want to make this my last opportunity? I don't know. I mean, now defensive tackle is interesting to me because I think, Noah Shannon would certainly be welcome back, but they're so deep at that position right now. And if you have him and Logan Lee back, would it nudge Y.A. Black out? Would he, and I'm just speculating on this, but, would he say, you know what, I think it's my turn to be a starter here, and I don't want to be a backup as a junior. Or, I would say that out of those groups, that YA would be the one that has positional flexibility, that maybe Kirk Ferentz does what he did last year, or what he did with Linderbaum, and that is, we think YA could be a good defensive tackle, start for us and maybe go to the NFL that way, but we think he has the potential to be an elite offensive tackle, and we want to give him a shot on that side of the ball. And, because right now he's actually probably thinner than he would be if he was an offensive tackle. He's about 306. He'd probably gain another 15 to 20 pounds if he was an offensive tackle, which his body, based on what I saw at the hot chicken eating contest, he can certainly put him away. But, and would that be an option, and I'm just, again, there's some talk of that, but, how far does it go? And would he say, you know what, I want to play defense here, but I'm not playing offense here. I'll go somewhere else. And so that's a tightrope you got to walk.
It probably depends somewhat on what they do in the portal at tackle, at offensive tackle.
Right. But, it's based on ability for him. If he was to flip sides, and even if you got a Walter Rouse, I think he's got a chance to start. I think he's physically very impressive, and he just, gathers the technique pretty quickly. Maybe it's a guard one year and it's a tackle the next. Maybe it's a tackle all the way. I don't know, but I think he's got a very strong likelihood of being a major player at that position. And then, now wide receiver, I think they're at an upgrade right now. I think Seth Anderson's a pretty good player. And, Keegan Johnson, I thought was a really good player too, but he only played 21 snaps this year. And would he have been able to play next year? I don't know. And Arlen Bruce, I think, was, whether or not he was miscast, misused, just not the right fit for him, not the right fit for Iowa. I think Seth Anderson's probably a better candidate for Iowa's offense. And then, Nico Ragaini, bringing him back, I think right now they're just missing a true X, and that could be Deontay Vines. I think he's played well, and if not, maybe it's somebody else, and then Vines is one of 3 or 4 starters. So I think that's, I think at worst that's a wash, but actually I think it's an upgrade at wide receiver, and of course at quarterback, I think it's definitely an upgrade. So tight end, it's not really fair to grade that because Laporta is so outstanding, but I think Eric Hall is as good as somebody you can get. And I think him and an improved Luke Lachey, it might be even. And you know what, that may be the best combination in the country, because Georgia, one of Georgia's combination guys are going to the NFL.
Yeah, this is just me, not being able to see what it's going to look like in August, but it would be nice to add another receiver, I think, and then potentially a corner. I think in the bowl game, we did see, the playmaking ability of 3 really good young players in Cooper DeJean, Sebastian Castro, and Xavier Wonkpa. So and then you have this, the steadiness and the solid play of Quinn Schulte. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, I don't know, Brandon Dees Fernandez, some of these other guys that are behind, are any of those guys going to end up in the portal? Are any of those guys developing enough to play or help and just be solid depth next year? Those are questions. I think that's a big part of Iowa this month, right, Scott? Evaluating the roster and where the needs are.
Jamari Harris is the one that I think you really wonder about, and I'd like to know more about. I mean, is he going to be able to play at the same level that that he played at a year ago before he got hurt, because that Citrus Bowl, he played really well against a pretty good team. He had a late interception, had like 9 tackles, had 4 interceptions that year, and he was thrown in there, in some really tough situations and came out of it really well. Now he's been out for a year. Can he step up and be, keep ascending? If he can, the secondary probably will be every bit as good as it was this year, even without Kayvon, because I think as Kayvon
Moss.
Yeah, right. And I was going to go start with Kayvon, just with Wampa and him.
Mhm.
Wampa, Kayvon is an outstanding player and a leadership off the charts. Wampa
and more physical at this point.
Yeah, but Wampa was really good in that bowl. He was making some tackles, getting down on the box. I think his athletic potential is off the charts that we've seen. Jamari Harris versus Moss. Moss is an upgrade right now, but maybe Moss did get beat a few times. He also has incredible speed, and so I'm not going to really judge the two, but I think it can be mitigated pretty well. And then if you add in another guy who could be a number 3 corner, say
and that's
TJ
really what I think would be the view here, right? Is that third cornerback, because you lose Riley Moss, you lose Terry Roberts, who was hurt this year, but still he was you knew you had him. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what you need, because as you said, the not knowing how Jamari Harris is going to bounce back, it'd be nice to have bring in somebody experienced there. Yeah,
and that's the question: is do they believe that Jamari Harris can do all that? And I guess. If anything's told us anything in the last few years, is trust Bill Parker. He'll know. Mm-hmm. I don't know more than he does at that. But I think if you think, is Brandon Diaz-Fernandez, who's out all year, he seemed to take a step in the spring to be a really good minimum backup. I thought TJ Hall has shown a lot of potential. He got burned. Yes, that's a really tough matchup when you put him in basically single coverage against one of the best receivers in the country, or at least in the Big Ten, Trey Palmer.
Moss got burned a few times when he was young.
Yes, he did. Remember against Purdue? And it stuck with him, and TJ Hall, afterwards, he was it sounds like kind of inconsolable, just like, I'm sorry, I lost this game for us. It's my fault. And Moss was like, hey, I dealt with this. I understand. Don't hang your head. It's on everybody. And, Cohen Entringer, they really like him too. I think he could be a number 3. And then one guy that I'm really excited about his athletic potential, and I think he can contribute. It's just a matter of where and when, and that's Devin Hilson. He's become a really good special teamer. He damn near got a couple block punts off the edge. I think he could be maybe your backup at cash, and how much weight could he put on, and maybe could even play outside linebacker. I don't know, because I think linebacker is the biggest question mark, maybe on the team next year, because you're you're losing an all-time great in Campbell, probably losing one of the top 5 linebackers in the Big Ten in Seth Benson, and then you're losing a guy who had great potential in Justin Jacobs. So Jay Higgins will step in at one spot. But then you've got a lot of question marks. Kyler Fisher, he played well in special teams, but how does that translate? How will he handle Nick Singleton next September, from Penn State? Does Zach Tweet get a shot? Carson Shire has kind of been that guy that's been elevating, but he was hurt a little bit. Jackson Rexroth played a lot of special teams as a walk-on. Do they bring in somebody? Now they played
Van Kekkerichs too, they like.
Yeah.
So, but those are also unknowns, that kind of like at corner.
Yeah.
You don't know some, entering, or you just don't know. Those guys, the coaches have an idea. We don't.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And, Justice Sullivan has been, had COVID really bad and sick, and then finally and hurt. And now he's finally back healthy. Maybe we see something, maybe we don't. And so we just don't know. And the unknown is where coaching comes in. Can somebody rise up? Jaden Harrell is probably another one that they like quite a bit. He's big and physical. Can he become an inside linebacker and either start or be a primary contributor? I charted the 4-3 versus cash, and they ran cash 71% of the time. And I would expect that to even increase next year with Castro. I mean, because he hits like a linebacker and he covers like a safety. And if you're not going to, unless you've got, even if you have two tight ends, do you lose that much? Maybe you bulk him up and call him a linebacker. I don't know. And then if you're in true passing situations, maybe that's when you bring in a third corner, or something like that, and maybe slide him inside, and he's a more of a 4.25 pass percentage. That's kind of what they were going to do with Justin Jacobs anyway. So I think this is it's interesting. It shows their coaching potential. There's a lot of moving pieces, but I think the secondary and the front line are in really good shape.
Yeah, and I have kind of the confidence that I have in them figuring out defensively is the skepticism I have of them figuring out offensively based on history. So, we talked about the personnel additions on offense, and they're doing what they can to upgrade or what they feel are upgrades on that side of the ball. Now it comes down to what's the structure of the staff on that side of the ball, and what are they going to do schematically on that side of the ball? To me, those are the biggest question marks this offseason.
Yeah, it is certainly after the personnel part of it is figured out. And it's to me, can they marry parts of the scheme that have worked with parts of the scheme that have not developed or don't work? And how much of that can be married in some respects? And because you look at different aspects, even over Brian's tenure, what has worked? Well, when they had Hawkinson and Fant, they were able to do things with them that, they scored 27 touchdowns in 2 years. That's something that is probably, something that they could do similarly with Luke Lachey and with Eric All, but why didn't they do that? Well, because they couldn't run the damn ball. That was part of it. And that's really, to me, the biggest problem that they've got to solve. And that is, how do you get more out of the running game? And because you need your outside zone to be effective in this offense. And it hasn't been since Alaric Jackson was there, because they could run left behind him his final year, and they were getting 4.6 yards per carry. And then you had Tyler Linderbaum, and then you had, even Mark Kallenberger was pretty decent on the backside. How do you do that? Well, you're going to have to go get Walter Rouse, or you're going to have to get somebody, and then you start moving around pieces, and then you got to hope for development, which I think is possible. I don't see them being too stagnant on the offensive line necessarily in their growth. I think Logan Jones has a lot of potential. I think Mason Richmond and Connor Colby have potential. And I think Jennings Dunker is maybe one of the biggest people I've ever seen in my life. So, they're all really young. They're all still sophomores or freshmen. And Bo Stevens has potential. And, can they, over the next 2 months, hit the weight room hard enough to where they get better physically and movements? And then can they get better fundamentally in April? Can they, become a little bit more limber in the summer? Can they get to the point where they're cohesive in August? Those are a lot of things to ask, but that's what you got to ask for. So I think, to me, though, number one is you've got to have a left tackle who can win matchups consistently on outside zone. If they can do that, the tweaks in the offense, to me, come in as a little bit better conceptually in the passing game, getting guys open in space. And what absolutely needs to happen is better play inside, and play calling inside the red zone, and especially inside the 10-yard line. That is where they really, really lacked for a long time. And so that's offensive coordinating, and that's play calling. But if you can run the ball, it'll make everything easier. It'll add to the space. It'll force players to play in the box, still not be successful, stretch the field, and then you have a quarterback who's a lot more accurate. And then it's schematic is about the tweaks, not the concepts. And then, but if they can't run the ball, it's not going to matter how much, they could bring in, Bobby Petrino from Texas A&M /UNLV/Missouri State. It's still not going to matter.
Yeah. And we've talked about this throughout the season. It starts up front, and that's really what they have to evaluate and figure out. You named a lot of guys there, Tyler Ellsbury. There are a lot of guys that were young this year. Ideally, you don't want to have Logan Jones start games less than a year after he makes a move from defensive line to center. I mean, that's a really tough setup for a young guy like that. But I like how he's built. Saw him, at a camp when he was a sophomore in high school and competed with some high-level kids at an Under Armour camp in Chicago. He definitely has the starter kit. It's just a matter of him developing, and I think he will. He'll be much better next year. I think Mason Richmond takes a step forward. I think Connor Colby takes a step forward. Dunker, we'll see. He's physically enough. He's just got to get sharper technique-wise and understanding the game. But, you got Tyler Goodson, who's an NFL-level running back. Caleb Johnson is a high-level running back. It's not the running back problem. It's figuring out, can you, alter zone blocking with some hat on hat? Can you do some different things up front? Now's the time to figure those things out.
And they ran a lot more counter this year than they really ever have. And that's the way to do that stuff, because then it is more hat on hat. It's getting better angles in a lot of cases because they just didn't have the technique or the athletic ability or the physicality to play a lot of, outside zone and make it effective, because you need to displace the line. They couldn't do that very well. So, and then, but the problem was, it was just, there are so many different areas where it was, the other teams are going to play 8 in the box because they're like, well, they can't run the ball anyway, but we're going to stuff it out completely. And we don't have any fear whatsoever what they do on the outside. They could, because whether it was the receivers not being able to get separation or the quarterback not be able to hit them anyway, or hit them in stride or make a big play.
Or having the time.
Right. They got better in pass pro, I thought, throughout the course of the year. The Nebraska game was somewhat of an aberration. And in some ways, the one weird play where we've seen the screenshot of Jack Plum going inside and everything, that's because the quarterback made that call. That was an Alex Padilla thing, So now, then you're thinking, well, why did you do it anyway? Well, you got to listen to your quarterback. Your quarterback says, alter your protection this way, and somebody's coming free, then it's on the quarterback in some respects. And that's probably the hallmark of the Alex Padilla error right there. And that's why he didn't start, because especially what we saw in the first 2 weeks, anybody could have probably started at game 3. And if Padilla couldn't beat out Petrus at that point, then it was like, well, you got to go with the best guy. And Petrus continues to be the best guy. Maybe not the great player for the situation, but he's the best guy. And I think, and so when, they're just going to have to start getting some of these matchups. They're going to have to start winning some of them. They're going to have to displace the line of scrimmage. And, the counters worked, but, and you've got a running back, Caleb Johnson, who I think is, I think he can take a step forward and be a 1,400-yard guy. I think he could be a 1,500-yard guy, an all Big Ten caliber running back. And, I like, LaShawn Williams as a number 2. He reminds me of Adam Robinson a lot. And I like, Terrell Washington and Jazz Patterson. They really are invested in Jazz. I think he ran really well the other day too. So, Kirk couldn't keep from singing his praises. Same with Brian. So I think there's there's a lot of potential in the backfield, but they've got to make sure up front they're winning some of these matchups, because if they can't, then it stunts everything. And then you're going, all right, now what? Now what do you do? And maybe 1 or 2 teams are going to create problems because they care about football too. But They just don't. They're just going to have to make sure that, not to worry about the other team, just worry about ourselves, and again, win those matchups.
Yeah, no doubt. It's going to be a very interesting off season for sure. And we're going to talk a lot about it. We'll talk a little bit more football here on the other side of this break. Want to let folks know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. And we'll talk a little bit about mental health here later in the podcast. But doing great work, the folks at Systems Unlimited. Let's hear from some more of our sponsors here briefly, and we'll be back on the other side to talk some more Hawkeye sports. And we're back. Got my coffee refreshed here, ready to finish up strong, as we used to say on Good Call back in the day.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
The good old days at the Iowa River Power Company.
Yeah.
Was that what it's called?
Power Restaurant.
Power Restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah. Iowa River Power Restaurant.
Sirloin steak special on Thursdays. I think they still have that.
Yeah, I think so. I was there on Wednesdays with Tom and Todd in a lot of cases, and Todd always had the KC burger, and I always had the patty melt and
old dudes, man.
Yeah, I know. Good Lord,
old dude flashbacks. Yes.
Good Lord.
There are people out there laughing right now. The people that have been around with us old dudes for quite a while.
Right.
Scott, I didn't mention this earlier because I think we take it for granted. As much as we focus on punting is winning, we still take it for granted at times. And Tory Taylor coming back may be the biggest news and biggest addition or not subtraction, however you want to frame it, for this football team.
Yeah, no question. You've got a guy who's got I think it was 15 or 16 kicks inside the 6-yard line this year. That was just unreal. And the other day, he had 6 punts inside the 15. He is a weapon that is rare in today's football. And, we had at the Battle of the Rap Bands or whatever it was on Wednesday night, I had a chance to talk to Tory, me and another reporter, and Tory, he asked if he was going to come back or not. He's like, if you guys tweet this, I'll never talk to you again. I'm like, okay. He goes, I'm coming back. And I'm like, whoa, really? Why? and really a lot of it is more so that there are only 32 punting jobs in the NFL, at least at quarterback, there are 96,
Right.
And there might not be a lot of movement. And he said, a couple months ago, I was pretty focused on leaving, but now he's just really kind of eyeing the idea of coming back one more year for Iowa. And that says a lot in what it does for the defense. Again, we've seen it year in and year out, just how he puts Iowa's defense in a position to win. He has had very few shanks, and he's had way more awesome punts so the fact that, like the other day, he punts them, he puts them backed up. What do? They threw 2 pick sixes out of that. And, we saw it against South Dakota State, which actually does have one more game, a championship game.
I'm looking forward to that.
I did too, because
it's Solon on Solon.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Bach against Cam
Miller. Cam Miller. Yeah, exactly. And, 2 teams that I think if they were in, say, group of 5 conferences, they'd be playing at pretty good bowl games.
Yep, I agree.
And who knows, if they're playing with Tulane, would I say South Dakota State could beat Tulane? Maybe. I wouldn't surprise me at all if one of them was in the Cotton Bowl at some point.
For those that don't know, South Dakota has not lost since losing here.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, North Dakota State hasn't lost since losing to South Dakota State. So now they play each other in a huge rivalry game anyway, and one for all the marbles in FCS. And so I don't know, I'm losing my point there.
We're talking about Tory.
Oh, yeah. In South Dakota State game, 2 kicks inside the 10, both led to safeties. They went 7-3, which is still one of the more anomaly games of all time. But yeah, so it's kind of funny.
Yeah. And, rightfully so, the defense deserves a ton of credit, separated from what Tory Taylor does, because he belongs to the special teams as much as the defense would like to claim him. He is a special teams performer. And as bad as Iowa's offense has been the last 2 years, without him, no way in hell do they win 18 games. If you had shaky special teams along with shaky offense, I don't care how good your defense is, you're not winning 18 games. So his return is huge, and it keeps you from having to figure that out. Kind of like where we were at this point last year, where we knew Caleb Shudak was leaving, and we were like, okay, we know how important place kicker is. What's Iowa's outlook? And then we saw in the spring, oh shit, these guys both were bad. Yeah. And then a little shaky at the beginning of the year, Aaron Plum was, and then Drew Stevens figures it out. You can't expect the next punter to be Tory Taylor, but you have Tory Taylor now, and that is huge.
You have him, and now you're looking at it going, okay, they have the best special teams in the country again.
Yep.
Because last year, as you said, I mean, going all the way into mid part of the season, we weren't sure what they had at kicker. And then Drew Stevens, hit 16 of 18 field goals, and his only 2 misses were 40 plus, and they weren't exactly, easy kicks. So I think one of them hit the upright even. So, he actually had a terrific year. Luke Elkin has been a high-level snapper, and that's always something that you could always overlook. And then next thing you know, it matters when it matters. It sounds like both Elkin and Drew will be put on scholarship. So you'll have that. You add Tory Taylor. It also means that they could probably now go hard after the Minneapolis punter. What's his name? Miller? Drew Miller, yeah. And I'll probably offer him a scholarship for that year. You don't even need to worry about the 1 year gap, whatever. And Cooper DeJean, as good as a player as Charlie Jones was as a returner, Cooper might even be better there. Now, kick returner, I think they'll probably have to do something different there. I don't know that you want Caleb Johnson returning kickoffs when he's going to be playing a lot of snaps at running back for a second straight year. Oh, well, that one you could survive.
Put Patterson back there.
Yeah, Patterson. You can put maybe Terrell Washington, maybe one of the wide receivers. That one you have time to figure out.
Yeah.
And you can, I think of the positions, that's probably the least one you worry about, because with all the touchbacks that happen anyway, if
didn't have to worry about a lot about kickoffs this year anyway.
Yeah, right. And he might not next year either, except against Ohio State this year. But yeah, really what you just do is, if you don't feel confident in that, just fair catch, get the ball to 25. And whereas punt returner, you do need somebody who could secure the ball at a minimum. That really hurt him against Nebraska, and then be able to do something with it, like Desmond King did, like Charlie Jones did, and Cooper DeJean certainly can, because he averaged 16.5 yards per return. Yep. They'll be the best in the country again at that position group. And you look at the defensive side and where they end up statistically, it's really incredible to be number 2 scoring defense in the country this year and still give up a 54 at Ohio State. They had 9 games where they held opponents to 10 points or less, and it would have been 10 if it wasn't for Northwestern scoring on the last play of the game. This was as good of a year as you'll ever find defensively. To me, you could stack it up with 04, 09, whatever year you want. This is just as good as any of those other years.
Yeah, I would agree. I didn't think I'd see an 04 replication. This one, not the strengths were in different areas, I think, in some cases, but certainly right there with 04 in my mind. I think you look at it, Scott, is with what we talked about at linebacker, potentially not being as good defensively, although I'm not ruling that out. Could definitely
Yeah.
be as good, probably not better. Most likely, maybe a little bit of a step back as they figure things out, but maybe not. It's all on the offense here. It's all on the offense doing its part, which it hasn't done the last 2 years, and at least being adequate, competent, average, whatever term you want to use. With the special teams and defense we just talked about, that's where it has to happen. You have to take a step forward offensively if you want to be as good as you potentially can be as a program and not waste how good you are on defense and special teams.
No question. Because you look over the last, say, 5 or 6 years, and what were the little areas that really kept Iowa from getting to Indianapolis and competing there? I mean, last year it was the offense, in 21. This year, obviously, it's the offense as a whole. In 2020, I mean, it was a weird year. It was an aberration year because of the COVID, but quarterback was the reason for that. 19, it was, when you lose Alaric Jackson and then you had struggles at guard, through that was really a factor. And plus they had a pretty tough schedule. You lose by 5 points to Penn State, 7 points to Michigan, 2 points to Wisconsin. And, and you're still right there. Otherwise, in 18, it was probably the running backs. You just didn't quite have, you had great tight ends. You had good wide receivers, quarterback who threw 26 touchdown passes, a really good defense, linebackers that year, if I recall, that they had some injuries, just like in 20, at the very beginning against Purdue. So they're going to have deficits. They just got to mask them pretty well. And then the second part is they're going to have to upgrade the offense, because I think people realize that this year, it's one thing to get to Indy. That's an accomplishment. But it's another thing to feel like you can compete in it and go up and say, all right, we'll go there and maybe we're the underdog, but we've got a fighting chance. We've got a puncher's chance. And maybe in 18 and 19, you would have felt like they did. 20, certainly they would have. But the last couple of years, you'd say, they just can't score points. They can hold them and hold them and hold them and hold them. But then at some point, like, not as bad as the Ohio State game, but, at some point they're just like, it's a Michigan game this year. Your defense can only be asked to do so much. Sometimes your offense is going to have to score to keep up. And maybe, again, I think quarterback, I think it's an upgrade, a massive upgrade. We haven't seen even a quarterback hit 60% of their passes since Beathard 15, and he hit 64% 2 years ago. So that's an area, to me, I think he's going to be well situated. But you've got to be able to run the ball, and you got to be able to have that offensive line. So, which is why getting at minimum one guy who maybe is an all Big Ten caliber guy in the portal is going to be the difference. Because I do think that the other guys can be. I saw a lot of progress with Logan Jones. The snap is one thing that we're all kind of fixated on, but I was watching some of his blocking, the way he was sticking with guys, the way he was moving guys, and I saw it. Okay, I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing a guy who's maybe not Linderbaum, but maybe potentially Austin Blythe, and that's really damn good. And I think Colby and Richmond are have NFL potential. Maybe not first round, but they could be quality starters. It's just, can they bring in a Walter Rouse, you're the left tackle, Mason Richmond, you're the right tackle, Connor Colby, you're a guard, and then, all right, Bo Stevens, your turn's up. Jennings Dunker, your turn. Go at it. So I think that's kind of where I wonder. And Mike Myslinski, he's been hurt.
I was just going there. I'm wondering where he fits in this, because he was highly regarded when he got here.
Yeah, he was playing some guard. He was playing some center. I think that they still felt like he was still a little limited. So, maybe he gets a crack, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. And I don't think anybody, period, is so good that you're like, like Kirk always will say, well, if somebody beats out Tyler Linderbaum, shame on him. And I don't think anybody's going to have that. Richmond maybe has the most equity of the group. Nick DeYoung has played a lot too, but I think overall, they can move all those pieces around and feel like, just best player plays.
And it's really important, Scott, because as we've talked about, this gets a lot harder after 23 when the divisions go away. Then your odds of playing in that big, USC and UCLA are added to the mix. It becomes a lot harder. This next season, it's big. If you can get back to Indy, be competitive there, hell, maybe even win that game, that's a lot of juice for you going into the new look Big Ten. If you don't win the division this year, if the offense costs you the division again, that becomes a harder sell moving forward with as much competition as there is in this league.
Yeah. And really what you got to worry about is competing with your neighbors, and who knows, right now, Matt Rule looks like a great hire and Luke Fickell looks like a great hire. And I think most of us probably expect Matt Campbell not to be 4-8 again. That they'll be an improved team. Brett Bielema, is proving to be a great hire there. Purdue could be way down. But I think DJ Fleck has been consistent and he's been pretty good there. So you've got to make sure you beat your neighbors in all of these areas, for recruits and in those games. Before you even really mention the Ohio States and Michigans and Penn States and what have you. And USC, UCLA, I look at them as kind of the Maryland of the West Coast,
You're bringing in another blue blood, though.
Yeah, right. Now, can Iowa compete with those teams individually? Absolutely. You bring in, you look at the success they've had with Penn State, with Michigan. You bring USC in the third week of November coming to Kinnick Stadium, and it's like, was it Minnesota? Yeah, you're going to win that game, but you got to be able to run the freaking football too. And that's again where it's going to be. So,
could you imagine Iowa's defense with USC's offense?
They
win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think they play Monday.
Yeah, no doubt.
Whichever way you go, I think they play Monday. But yeah, they're of course the way they crap that game down their leg against Tulane. It's just, and Utah for that matter.
USC's defense was as tough to watch as Iowa's offense.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Except as we saw, good defense can still keep you in most games.
Yeah.
Good offense or bad defense will get you blown out if your offense can't keep up, if they turn the ball over, if they just can't complete passes and stuff. So I don't know. Neither one's appealing. Neither one's what you want.
One more thing I want to hit on here football-wise, Scott, and we'll have plenty of football talk moving forward here this month, but I want to hit some Iowa basketball. We had a big story there that we should discuss, but a lot of questions right now on the coaching. Any movement, restructuring, things like that. Anything you're comfortable talking about in terms of what you've heard, in terms of what might happen there? To me, one of the interesting things, LeVar Woods has got to be attractive for other schools, and he makes a good salary here, but he would seem like a guy. We talk about NIL and retaining players. I don't know. I know LeVar is very, entrenched in this community. His kids go to school here. I think it would be tough for him to leave, but we're seeing a lot of offers to players that they can't refuse. And I wonder if he gets something like that we don't know about right now, but could come.
That's a good point. He would be attractive to me at the NFL level, and he would be attractive to me at the college level. I think he's in a great spot for him because it just works well for him. And he's got number one, and he's also, he's been part of the staff for a long time under Kirk and
played here,
as you said, Mason's here and his daughters are here, his third daughter, I guess, or his second daughter, third child. So he's still got, some young people here. So maybe he'd rather prefer to stick with that for another few years. But I think him and Kelvin Bell are really underrated in what they do recruiting wise and teaching wise, because this defensive line, you look back a year ago after they lost Chauncey Golston and Davion Nixon, and the year before that, AJ Epineza, and Anthony Nelson before that, Parker Hesse, and all these NFL guys, Jack Heflin, and Zach Van Valkenburg, and we're all kind of wondering, okay, this is really important. And yet they're just as good as they've ever been. And I think Kelvin, as a teacher and as a position coach, is absolutely beloved. And he gets the most out of his players, and he teaches them well, teaches them great fundamentally. And then I also think that recruiting wise, he might not have a peer on the staff. I think and the staff has a couple of really good top-notch recruiters, but I think him and LeVar are leaps and bounds the best two that you have. And so I think
I did a podcast with Leighton Jones the other day, and he talked a lot about his relationship with Kelvin and how important that was in him choosing Iowa.
I think you take care of Kelvin big time. I think Kelvin is a guy that you focus on. I think him and Phil Parker and LeVar, I think they may be the three most important coaches they have.
Yeah, and we'll see. I know a lot of the focus here is on Brian Ferentz and what happens there. And to me, at least right now, I think it's a fluid situation.
Yeah, I don't know that he has an offer, but the NFL season doesn't conclude until Sunday, the regular season, and then there's playoffs after that. There's going to be movement. There always is. Black Monday's coming, and there's going to be, there's already, 4 or 5 jobs that are open or very much will be open. There probably might be 2 or 3 more that kind of surprise you, like, wow, I didn't see that one coming. And then there's going to be a lot of assistants. New England has been discussed heavily, speculated about Bill O'Brien, about Brian joining Bill O'Brien in New England and bringing the band back together there, and I think there's some merit to that. Will it happen? I don't know. Brian right now is invested in Iowa because that's where his job is, and I don't think his dad would want it any other way. I do think there's going to be a place at the table for John Budmeier. I think he's going to be an assistant coach this year. Who that moves out, who leaves, I don't know that. I can't predict that. If that's, if it's a defensive assistant, then, you got Abdul Hodge, that could very well go to the defensive side of the ball. If it's offensive, then, who maybe it's John Budmeier as quarterbacks coach / coordinator. I think he's going to be, because he recruited Cade McNamara to Wisconsin, have a great relationship with him, but of course he went to Michigan instead. And then he also recruited Deacon Hill, and he couldn't do it on the field officially, but he orchestrated some of the passing changes this year. I think he's probably going to be a natural quarterback coach at minimum and something else. Now, I can't, it's all speculation beyond that.
Yeah. To me, the titles are whatever. You see co-coordinators in places and it works. Whatever you need to do, man, whatever you need to do to have Kirk, who we know is going to stay involved in philosophy. He's going to be part of the offensive decision-making and design. If Brian's still here, and then Budmeier, whatever it takes for those three, I don't care what they're called, whatever it takes for those three to marry their philosophies and approach to offense so it works. I think the titles are secondary.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're right. And you looked, and here's the things that I'm going to really focus on in the offseason about the offense, because it's so simplistic and it's lazy, frankly, for everybody just to put the pin on Brian Ferentz.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And I'm not saying that he's not part of the problem. I think he is. I think he's had some issues.
Well, you talked about the red zone play calling and inside the 10. That's on him.
It is. When you've got 3 passes I documented thrown into either the goal line or into the end zone itself this year from inside the 10-yard line, that's schematic. That's coordination. That's play design. It's
insanity.
Everything. Yeah, it's stupid. No question. And so at that point, you've got to evolve. You got to change. And if it's the play caller, if it's the scheme, whatever. But I also think that, like we said, with the running game, he can't block. He can't catch passes and he can't throw the football. Now, Kirk has been way more risk averse the last couple of years than he was even 4 or 5 years ago in the way, whether it's play calling or allowance of the offense to move. And part of that is because he knew that was the only way they could really win, which was just don't do anything stupid. Don't turn the ball over. Don't force things. Even you go back to the Penn State game where after Matt Hankins had that interception, I think it was, or that breakup, and they took knees to punt, with the 3-point lead late in the fourth quarter and force Penn State to go the distance. They'd rather try that, which is insane in itself, than run out the clock, because they didn't have the offensive line to make that happen. And they're more fearful of fumbling than they were of confident of getting a first down or getting a quarterback out and about. Now you have a quarterback who at least is much more accurate. If you get an offensive line who can block a little bit more, and I'm sure there's probably more trust in what the quarterback can do. All those things together with more scheme and philosophy, I think that will enable them to be less risk averse. Kirk's always going to be that way, and he's the head coach, so he has a right to be. But I think that they'll be more open. So you're right. I mean, if Brian stays in that position, people will lose their minds. But I don't think it's as big of an issue. I don't know. I don't know if I want to go that far. I think you just have to hope that the personnel improves to the point where the coordination can be allowed to do what it wants to do, because I don't think it really was this year, other than red zone, which has to improve, or it's all, you're going to lose a lot of close games.
And I don't really know as I have a concrete or hard position on George Barnett. We talked about the offensive line and the youth and the inexperience this year. I don't know how much that's him and developing these guys. To me, it's hard for me to evaluate George Barnett when I'm looking at the personnel, how much of it was him. I mean, he's in charge of developing these guys and then coaching them up when they're out. So I don't know. What's your take on that?
That is the biggest question I have, Rob. And that is it, is he up to the task or not? Because what we've seen in the past from Iowa, for the most part, are players, unheralded players that gradually get better, and by the end of their careers, they do something. And it's a lot of it's Ross Reynolds, it's Keegan Render, it's Kyler Schott, it's go on and on, Connor Bathelli, guys that just step right up, and by the time they're a 4th and 5th year player, they actually play pretty well. They may not be NFL guys, or they may be just marginal guys, practice teamers at best, but at least Cole Banwarts, they come in and they represent. I haven't seen that yet. Now, is that because, there just really weren't any 5th year and 4th year guys? Jack Plum was the only one out of the 18 and 19 classes that was still around. And, and maybe he just reached his ceiling and it was below what, you'd hope. But, Nick DeYoung was a former walk-on and he's been okay at times. But that to me is, I can't tell. I'm kind of there with you. That is just because there weren't enough older players to be able to judge whether they've been developed enough. And then the younger players are just getting better, but they're just not getting better as quickly as you need them to. Or is it, hey, the coach is just not as effective? That's probably an area kind of like with defense with Phil, where you almost have to trust Kirk because he knows good offensive lines. But, we also know Kirk. I would say that next week is the AFCA convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's kind of a meat market, if you will, for a lot of assistant coaches. I think that's probably where we'll get some answers next week, late in the week, and then early the following one as to where, will somebody move? Will somebody go? Will somebody go to the NFL? Will somebody go there? Because wide receivers is another area where you wonder about, there's just a lot of questions still on that side. And I don't have a lot of definitive proof one way or the other what's going to happen.
And that's really, that falls to Kirk, right? Is he needs to evaluate, as Brian said last week, and I thought it was not a good look for him when talking about, it being personnel and him doing the best he could. I kind of understood what he was trying to say. And there's truth probably to the personnel not being up to the task. But he helps bring in the personnel. And for Kirk, is it the injuries and, maybe attrition at wide receiver? Or is it Kelton Copeland developing and coaching the wide receivers? Is it, recruiting, development, combination of things at offensive line? Is it George Burnett not developing, identifying guys in recruiting, doing the things to make it? And that's tough, but that's what you get paid a lot of money for. And that's really what Kirk has to do here over the next month or so, is evaluate where the assistant coaches are and if these guys are up to the task.
Yeah, I mean, because it's going to be the difference, as we saw this year. It's the difference between 8-5 or going to Indianapolis. Going to Indianapolis like in 21, or going to Indianapolis like in 15, or winning those games and getting to the playoff, or getting to a major bowl game and winning 11 games, and they're capable of doing all of that. It's just a matter of, a player here, a coach here, that type of thing. And, when you look at the wide receivers, for instance, that is a combination of bad luck and, bad luck, but also, skill and development. I think it's really all of it. Like, for instance, here's Iowa receivers caught 76 passes for 796 yards. It's the fewest number of receptions and yards for that unit since 1982. Even in 2020, where only had 8 games versus 13, they had more catches and yards. And at 10.5 yards per catch, it was by far the lowest of the Ferentz era. So that's just for wide receivers. That's not counting tight ends. Right. So I think what you're looking at is it's everything. I mean, in 2019, I wrote about the offense, or the wide receivers, and how they had grown under Kelton, because you had 4 really high caliber guys in Ragaini, Tracy, Smith, and Smith-Marset. They caught 169 passes, which was tied for the most ever for that unit with the Marvin year, 2011. Yep. To go from 169 catches to 76, that's bad.
It's like Steve Martin and John Candy in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. You're going the wrong way. Yeah. What? How does he know where we're going? He's drinking.
Yeah, right.
But you're going the wrong way here. You're supposed to get better. You're not going to always, there are going to be little peaks and valleys, but you can't have drop-offs like that.
Right. Jesus. They're averaging about 13 catches a game back then, and now you're, I don't know, math, 6, 5.5 to 6 for your receivers.
Yeah.
Now you could be a tight end centric offense. There's no sin in that. But man, you got to get more out of that than what you have right now.
Yeah, no question. We need to hit anything else on football wise? I know we got our picks that we can hit at the end of the show. Yeah. I think we hit everything football wise, haven't we?
Yeah, I think we're good. So we can move on to the basketball topic, which is pretty important.
Yeah. Just to touch on wrestling and women's basketball before we hop over to men's basketball. Got a chance to get out to the Soldier Salute last week, Scott, at Extreme, after we talked on Thursday. And great event. Look forward to that continuing. I hope it does. I think the fans really enjoyed it. Had a little edginess to the Spencer Lee, Drake Ayala final at 125. I think that was the veteran teaching the young pup a little lesson about how things work. And that was fun to see. So good event there. Iowa Wrestling will be playing host to Illinois tomorrow night in the first Big Ten duel at Carver Hawkeye Arena. I know those tickets sell very well. I don't know if they're sold out again all for the home duels as they were. Are they?
Yeah, they are.
So,
yeah.
Be a nice crowd over there tomorrow night. And then Sunday at Purdue for another duel. And that one, I believe, is on the Big Ten Network. So chance for Iowa wrestling fans to get into Big Ten action, always an exciting time of year. The Iowa women, I think, are off until this weekend and have another road game. Lost a tough one last Sunday at a much improved Illinois team. The women, I believe, fell to 16th in this week's rankings. And I think kind of learning a lesson that the target is on the back and you got to bring it every night. So tough game for Iowa this Saturday. And this is a Fox game, Scott, at Michigan. Number 14 Michigan against number 16 Iowa in Ann Arbor. That's 3:30 on Saturday on Fox. So big stage and a chance to kind of get a big win. I think Iowa, this is kind of, you're starting to want to build your resume now to get that home court when you get into the NCAAs. And I think the Iowa women need to continue to do that.
Yeah, no question. And losing to Illinois Illinois is an ascending program. They made a great coaching hire, no question. Definitely. I think they're going to be a problem, if you want to say, or they're just going to be a good team, there's nothing wrong with that. That's good, but they have a target, as you said, that when you're playing the schedule that they're playing UConn and NC State and the Big Ten, everybody knows how good Iowa is. And everybody knows who Caitlin Clark is. Everybody's going to come at them. And I think that's really what it's, I'm sure they recognize that. And if they haven't, they're going to continue to recognize it. And maybe this isn't the year that they win the Big Ten regular season crown. But the big question, I think, for Iowa is how does this impact March? And, do they continue do they have a home bid? And I think that they'll gerrymander the selection process however they want to make sure Iowa has, 2 games at home because, they sold out last year. There were 1 million people watching that game. So I think that's going to be a major factor. But then also, I think can they advance in the NCAA tournament? And I'm not saying all this is just ancillary or whatever, but it really does. Everything should be pointed towards March when it comes to the women's basketball team. And these games matter. They matter in the narrow, but ultimately it's about the big picture and what they accomplish.
And it's not like things are falling apart. They're 11-4 against a tough schedule, 3-1 in the league. So they're fine. They got to play better defense. That's really what it comes down to for the Iowa women. There's no doubt they can score. They've got offensive weapons all over the floor. So Saturday, 3:30 Fox. If you can't make it to Ann Arbor, you'll be able to watch it on TV. The men's, Scott, and we've got a couple different storylines here. On the court, 8-6 overall, 0-3 in the Big Ten. A game tonight at home against Indiana, and then Sunday at Rutgers. This league is a bear, and I think I'm not sure there's top end teams that you would say, this is a top 5 team in the country. That type of level at the top of this conference, maybe we'll see. Time will tell. But top to bottom, this is a really good league. Watching Northwestern against Illinois last night, really good league, and Iowa kind of needs to figure that out, and they're going to have to do so without a huge piece in Patrick McCaffrey, who we found out earlier this week was taking a leave from playing. He's not taking a leave from the team. He's still with the team at practice, still traveling with the team. Although I did run in, I stayed and talked to Connor and Margaret last night after the rest of the media guys left, and I ran into Patrick as he was coming off the elevator, and we just chatted a little bit, and he wasn't sure whether or not he was going to make the trip to Rutgers on Sunday. Fran and Connor want him to go, but it's kind of a day-to-day thing with him dealing with the anxiety, and he was in good spirits, and it's kind of one of those things, if you have this or somebody that does, it's not like breaking your arm or breaking your leg where you can see kind of the concern or the injury. It's comes and goes. It's up and down. It's mental health is such a complicated area. And I just hope Patrick, he's dealt with this since high school. that he can find a place where he can do what he loves.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're dealing with mental health, whether it's anxiety or depression. It's not an always and ever. I mean, I deal with depression. I take medication for depression. I have for several years.
As do
And,
I.
and it goes from, before I did, you would, some days you just wake up and you hated the entire world and you don't know why, and even if I forget to take it, which is very rare now, but sometimes you go, what am I doing here? I don't understand. I don't feel like I want to leave. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to see anybody. And so when you deal with those issues, whether it's anxiety, depression, other related mental health challenges, you can't, it's not just like a physical injury where it's like, well, my ankle feels good enough. I think I can go out there, even though it's still a little bruised. I mean, when you're dealing with those, you can feel fine, and then all of a sudden it just hits you in the wrong way at the wrong
super
time.
unpredictable. So
Yeah.
Unpredictable, intense, sometimes mood swings.
Yeah. And it's, without going too deep, but yeah, absolutely. It can get really nasty and hard. And I'm sure with anxiety, when you're dealing with, a lot of, everybody's dealing with issues. So I'm not going to say basketball is bigger or more important than anything, but when you have that much focus on you and you're trying your best and it's not working out, the anxiety, I'm sure, has an issue. And, good on him for raising this awareness. This is a different era. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, we'd be like, suck it up, go out there and play. I know when I was playing sports, I was the same way. It's like, shut up, just go out there and do it.
Mental toughness.
Yeah, quit being a wuss. Go out there and do it. At a time, sometimes you think that way too, even now. But whether it's Simone Biles, at the Olympics or this or depression. I mean, remember Sean Welsh dealing with depression. It's something you just can't walk into and say, yeah, today I feel great, let's play. And then, because you don't know when it will hit you. It might hit you in the 5 minutes to go in the game and whether you're playing or not, so I think that's something that he's got to take care of. His parents have to take care of, and you wish him well because, we've talked about it with basketball and football, and this week underscored it again with what happened in football Monday night. These are games. Life is more important.
Yes. And I think if anything, a couple things. I think in terms of the Big Ten and its member universities, I think I've done a much better job. If you're going to say, Kevin Warren, if you're going to review his job performance, I think for me, and some of it's personal, but at the top of the list is the way he addressed mental health for the student athletes in the Big Ten was incredibly important. I think Iowa's done a better job with that and giving resources to the student athletes who need it. As you said, there aren't any professional sports teams in Iowa, and there's an intense microscope that these players perform under, these student athletes perform under, and it weighs on them. And then you have the strains of, the public having more access to them than they ever have before in social media channels. Patrick and Connor, I talked to yesterday, they both deactivated their Twitter accounts at the beginning of December, I think, which was a good thing. But in talking to Margaret yesterday, his mother, Margaret McCaffrey, she noticed it the most during the Eastern Illinois game. He went to the foul line and came close to throwing up on the foul line. That's because it's physical too with Patrick because of the cancer. He's on medications and the anxiety plays into that. He's not eating. He's not sleeping. She said it affects him the most in the morning and at night. So if he's playing a basketball game at night, obviously that's a danger area for him, but he had to go back and throw up in the locker room during that game. So, it's really important for him to just get himself healthy physically and mentally, and they're married together because of the cancer. And the guy's been through a ton in his life, you know, from overcoming cancer to watching his best friend succumb to it, you know, and then figuring out the right medications so he can have, you know, he didn't even get to, at 6'9", he didn't even reach 200 pounds for the first time in his life. I think it was last year or the year before, because they were trying to get the right medication cocktail together where he had, you know, he felt like eating, and then he had stamina and was able to work out like in the weight room and get those things together. So he's made a lot of progress, but it's a constant fight, and that's mentally draining on you, the physical part. And then, as Scott said, just, you know, the microscope and playing, you know, at this level around here, we all know what it can be like.
You know, and you throw on the demands that athletes have, you know, the exposure, as you said, you know, the fact that these athletes are, you know, so, you know, you can touch them in the community through social media, through other means, that it's very difficult for them to go and put their brains on ice. It's tough for us, you know. I mean, we're accessible way more than we ever were before. I mean, when people could send you a nasty email, and that was it. I mean, now it's constant barrage of things on Twitter and whatever. But when you look at Patrick McCaffrey, if they're losing, if he's missing shots, and, you know, he's struggled in those last 3 games. I think he was like 5 of 29 or something from the floor. And that's something that it's really hard to, you know, and you're putting pressure on yourself, and you have those emotions, and you have that the mental certainty. Yeah. And things aren't going well. I mean, they've lost 3 straight. They're 8-6. This is a team that I think we expect to be better than that. I don't know how good, but, you know, you throw all those things in the wash, man, the clothes get repainted. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here with these guys, that it's a challenge for them. And so, yes, I feel like for him, he just needs to take as much time as he needs. And, you know, maybe it's, you know, and it's hard for the teammates, but maybe it's one day, and then the next day it's not, you know. And I don't know if that means you just say, you know what, stay away for the rest of the season or what have you. But I think needs to be some. This is a really challenging period of time for him personally, and then it does spill over to the team, you know, which is not performing very well, you know, which is not an issue that it's not the same issue as this, not at all. But I think it does add to the stress probably for the coach, you know, who has to deal with it on both regards.
Yeah, no question. And as we said earlier, it's not recovering from a ankle sprain or some other physical injury. He's going to continue to have anxiety. And it's a matter of getting to the point where he can manage it and, again, play the sport that he loves, play the sport that he grew up. And that's, for him, I think right now, it's finding that happy place or happy enough place to be able to play the sport he loves, which in turn will help his mood, which in turn will help his anxiety. But it's a very difficult formula. Until he can get back, Scott, they are going to continue to play basketball games. And the first one is tonight against a very good Indiana team, one that, you know, I think you could say has a real good chance to win this league if it plays to its potential. And now we get to see Iowa won against Iowa State without Chris Murray at home. This isn't, you know, a game that can't be won, but Iowa has to be better defensively. And watching this team with or without Patrick McCaffrey, to me, Scott, it just looks, to use a Fran phrase, disconnected. You watch it on both ends of the floor, and the pieces, you know, you have talent in Chris Murray and Tony Perkins and Philip Rebracha and Patrick when he plays. And there's the individual parts, I think, have the potential to be a good team, but they're not playing as a team.
Right. And that's where they're having some major issues. And that's where it's going to be a problem the next 3 games, next 4 games, next whatever games, because there's no let up in the Big Ten. And, you know, losing by 4 at Penn State, I thought they had a really good competitive comeback, to put themselves in position to close it. But they just dug themselves in too big of a hole. Offensively, they were not connected at all at Nebraska. It was a dreadful offensive performance for them.
What is it about Nebraska? We've seen them have shooting issues at Nebraska before. It must be something with, is it the balls or the rims or whatever? It's the trip across the Missouri. Something goes wrong when they head over there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it's good to question. I don't know. I mean,
wasn't there a game where they were like 1 for 17 from 3 or something out there?
Yeah, and it was like a close game, but they just could not hit threes for anything. And I think it's weird. The time is weird. Sometimes, I see this with Northwestern football, not so much the last year or two, and this could be a mental element in the mosaic of a season. And that is when students are gone, that sometime and the arenas are not full or they're just different in texture, that the mental element for some of these teams just changes. And, and I'm not suggesting I'm not putting any excuses out there for it. This is on them, but Eastern Illinois.
The people in the YouTube chat think we're making excuses for Iowa football, just to let you know.
For Iowa football or basketball?
Football.
Oh, football. All right. Well,
we're not blaming Brian Ferentz enough, apparently. We love you guys in the chat room, by the way.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Brian is a major factor of the Iowa problems, but he's not the only factor. Anyway, getting back to hoops here. Eastern Illinois, playing in the middle of the day in front of nobody. Because of weather. Yeah, that's a factor. Is it the reason? No, that's not the reason they didn't play any defense at all. And then you look at Nebraska. They didn't shoot the ball well on the road. At Penn State, it took some time before they got in there. But as we see, these next couple of games are unreal for them. Indiana at home, talent-wise, as good as it gets. I mean, Purdue was number 1 in the country and just got upset by Rutgers, who then they play next.
Right.
And Purdue might be the best team in the country if it plays well. That luckily for Iowa, they don't play them for a while. But Rutgers, they do play. And if Steve Peichel could be close to the coach of the last 4 or 5 years in the Big Ten to take what Rutgers was and put them in
what he's done.
Amazing. I remember when he brought Stony Brook to Iowa for the NIT, and Dev had a great game that like 20 points in the first half. But I could see the way he was positioning his team and the way he was structuring it to take the crowd out of it, because the crowd was great, to do all those things. And I'm like, okay, this guy can coach. He knows what he's doing. And then to go to Rutgers and be able to do it, be good at it, and win against number 1 teams, and to be a team that you're walking in and you're Iowa, and 4 or 5 years ago, you're like, win. And to go, whoa, my, this is going to be really difficult to even compete. Tells you everything you need to know. And then you got Michigan at home, and Maryland at home, and Northwestern beats Illinois. Illinois is 0-3 in the Big Ten. And then Ohio State, Michigan State. It's like, oh, my God, this is like a tsunami. And it could get really out of control very quickly. So you have to do what the coaching cliches are: win one at a time, one possession at a time. And that's what they're going to have to do tonight. They're going to have to play their best game of the year to be in this game. Will they win? I don't know, but they're just going to have to. Otherwise, it could get really ugly very, very quickly.
Interesting enough, Scott, and this will kind of segue into our picks review of the season, but Iowa is favored tonight by 1 point against Indiana. Surprises me. Surprise you?
A little bit, yeah. But, Vegas looks at it in a lot of ways, or, hey, Iowa still has a midseason Naismith guy who had great success against Indiana individually. Patrick McCaffrey is a great player, but they can coalesce around him. It's at home. They probably expect Iowa to have one of its best efforts, and Indiana at times has been up and down. Just it's the nature of the program. So I'm not surprised at all. But what I am not going to shy away from is they have to play really well, and they have to execute at the free throw line. Because if they have a 50, 55% performance, it might be just enough to lose by 2 or 3 points.
Fran gave us an update yesterday. It looks like, provided he was able to practice yesterday, Josh Dix will be able to play tonight. Twisted his left ankle, I believe, at Penn State. And it was scary because he went through, a major injury in high school, with a broken leg. Ogundele is out tonight. And these are kind of where we're going to see. I was going to need some minutes from these big bodies, even if it's just, 2, 3, 5 minutes of banging and maybe picking up some fouls. Fran did, unsolicited, singled out Riley Mulvey as a guy who's made progress and who we could see more of tonight. And with Indiana's size and athleticism, that's important. Otherwise, you run that risk of, getting Philip Rebracha in foul trouble or Chris in foul trouble. So it'll be interesting to see what the rotations look like tonight and if Mulvey's able to contribute, because at this point, he's a year and a half into his career. You would hope he'd be able to give you at least some minutes.
Yeah, he has to. I mean, knowing who he's going against,
Yeah.
because you're going to have, you've got to protect as much as anything. And this is probably why defensively it's going to be the challenge, because when you got Rebraca, you don't want him challenging all those shots and competing in the post, because it's easy to pick up 2 quick fouls. It's Jackson Davis. It just is. And Mulvey's going to have to go in there. And as you said, it's like in football, no sin in punting, and in basketball, no sin in fouling once in a while. You're going to need some physical people. And Carter Kingsbury has been a guy who has picked up some minutes, and he's going to have to probably now. But this is just, they're in a really tough spot.
Kingsbury's perimeter shooting. I mean, I'm not sure people realize it, but Patrick he had the second most threes on the team behind Chris. So, that's, and Chris talked about it yesterday at Carver, not having Patrick, that Patrick does a nice job of helping to spread the floor because he can play inside or out. So they're going to have to figure that out as well.
And you're going to need a quality performance from, and I'm sure he feels it, as Peyton Sanford, and for a lot of the promise, he's had kind of a sophomore slump, and that happens from shooters from time to time. And in a skill sport like this, it's very difficult. And so you're going to need that consistent performance from him. Can you get it? Well, it might be the difference. I mean, this is where not having even Josh Ogundele is hurting, because it could be only 10 minutes a game. But it's go in there, defend, take him out. Take out a foul, maybe get a foul, get a rebound and try to get a putback, and you get a foul out of him. Just the smallest things could really add up. And then they're going to have to be much more consistent in the backcourt as well. And having Connor out there, he'll be the tough guy. He'll draw a lot of it. He'll do everything as he always does. But this could be a real challenge for Iowa, no question.
Yeah, Connor moves into the starting lineup, so likely we'll see Ulis at the 1, Perk at the 2, Connor at the 3, Chris at the 4, and Philip at the 5 tonight. And then we'll see coming off the bench, you got Bowen, Dix, Sanford, hopefully Sanford, Carter Kingsbury, and Riley Mulvey. Going to need everybody, all hands on deck tonight. So that is an 8:00 start. So we'll hear excuses from people that it was started too late, so they can't make it to Carver. We're back in basketball, focus on the lack of attendance at Carver Hawkeye Arena, which will be no students tonight either. So that drawback as well. But
the tweets of what's the crowd like?
Looks like nobody's there.
Yeah, what a shame. What a bug. Well, why aren't you here? Well, it's because I got to work in the morning and it's 2 hours away. Oh, yeah, well, don't bitch at me about it.
Yeah, get over there. And I think this is another discussion. I'm not going down this road, but it might be. I think it was it last night or the night before when Michigan State played Nebraska at home? They were selling 4 tickets for $25 to get people in the Breslin Center. And that's Michigan State. So Iowa's marketing department may want to take a look at some of those things and try to, because the attendance this year has been abysmal.
Did you watch any part of the Iowa State-Oklahoma game last night?
I saw the crowd. Yeah, that was
Oh my God.
brutal.
That was like Sunday afternoon at 1:00 against directional Idaho State. I mean, it was bad. And it shows you, I think more and more what we're seeing is a separation between football and men's basketball as the king. I mean, because football is still on the consciousness. We spent an hour and a half roughly talking about the portal and additions and what they need to do. And that's what people talk about. And then, the season's not over with. So people are more concentrated on that. It used to be kind of, you get to late December, like throughout the month of December, it'd kind of be up and down. And then late December, it would be the turn the page to basketball for most people. But now it might be Groundhog Day.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just an Iowa thing.
No, it isn't. No, not at all.
It's a national thing.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. Oklahoma had a top 25 team in their building last night, and it was crickets.
Yeah, I mean, and they had just an absolute officiating faux pas that was just disgusting.
Yeah, brutal.
If it's one of those where the Iowa State angst over officiating is validated by that. I'm like, I have this picture on my phone that I save and I throw out there once in a while. It's a raccoon wrapped around a beer can on a deck.
I've seen that before. I've seen you tweet that before.
I'm like Big 12 basketball officials, because to not see that push down when they're inbounding the ball. I mean, it was a clear grab, push. Should be and I don't know. Anyway, they still won. It didn't affect them, but I was thinking, oh man, Oklahoma's going to hit a 3 here, and it's going to be nasty.
Oh, it'd be bloody murder right now if Iowa State would have lost that game. I mean, the saving grace for those officials and all of us on social media was that Iowa State was able to pull that one out. And so Iowa tonight at 8:00, Carver Hawkeye Arena. I think that's an FS1 game, if I'm not mistaken. And then Sunday morning, I believe, at 11 a.m. at Rutgers. Yeah. So you'll be able to watch that before watching football on Sunday. All right, Scott, give me the bad news. Let's do the picks. I know I didn't do well on these.
No, you did great.
Oh, did I?
Maybe your best week of the year.
All right, finishing strong.
You only lost 2. I only lost 3. So we both got Iowa right. We both got, I'll start with the ones we got right, both collectively. We both got Maryland. NC State was favored. I
was able to avoid watching Mike Loxley get doused in mayonnaise. I did my best to avoid that. I think Halas may have retweeted it on his feed, and I saw it, and I quickly just scrolled through. So I've been able to avoid it. I hope to never see that.
No, that was funny. I did watch it. We got Mississippi State over Illinois. Illinois was 1.5-point favorite.
What a wild ending to that game.
Yeah, that's one of those endings. We both got LSU pummeling Purdue. I mean, LSU gave up 14.5. Where we were different. First of all, we both lost Georgia -6.5. Because Ohio State lost by a point, almost won. Where we were different, the 2 that you got right, and before this even, so we both picked Wisconsin, and Wisconsin won. That was before our picks. But Minnesota -10, I still took the Mighty Gophers, and they won by 8, I think it was. So you took Syracuse.
And that was a late touchdown by Syracuse, if I remember right. That's a bad beat for you.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I stupidly picked Utah. You picked, -2. You picked Penn State, so you got you won that one. And then finally, I was out on a limb nationally. I was the only person at the Athletic to pick TCU outright, and I think there were 5 of us nationally, because I know there were people going, "Look at these guys; they were the only ones who did it." And then you picked Michigan, so there. Overall, I haven't added them up. I can really quick. But
no, you don't have to do that. Let's just finish on this high note.
Yeah, there you go.
Because I don't need the overview of my pathetic season.
You went 7-2 in the bowls. I went 6-3 in the bowls. So that's still not bad. Either one of us gets the spread. So
Yeah, hopefully somebody trusted us after. Well, you had a good season. I did not.
yeah.
So people hopefully people didn't go the other way on me and get beat.
Yeah, let's see. I went overall, since we're going to do this now. I went 64, 48, and 1 against the spread.
That's good.
You went 57 and 55. You got over the hump with the bowl games. 57, 55, and 1. So, yeah, overall it was good times there.
Both over 500 for the season.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah. So, yes, you right at the end. You cleared that hurdle, and here we are. And now we can start talking about next year, right?
Yeah, Scott and I will be doing a new podcast giving out gambling advice. No,
I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I will say though that the Iowa at Penn State game in mid-September will be a must-see TV. So get ready for that one, Rob.
Yeah, I think Penn State's going to be. They were good this year, young. But they've added some nice pieces in the portal as well. I would encourage people to look around the Big Ten too, and not just focus on Iowa. There's been some really good additions all over the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten football is going to be lit, as the kids used to say. Do they still say that?
I don't know. I'm too old to know if I say that stuff or not.
But I think it's going to be a really fun year in Big Ten football next year. And we'll talk a lot about it this offseason as it relates to Iowa and additions, roster management, roster movement as we move on here. Anything else before we get out of here, Scott? I think we've run about 2 hours. So hopefully.
Yeah, I think we're good on all that. I mean, yeah, we've got to save some we'll see what happens next week and beyond for Iowa football, what additions they make, what subtractions and changes happen to their coaching staff. And it likely will overshadow anything on the basketball court. Even a couple of wins in a row might spark some interest, but it's still not going to have the same interest in. I mean, let's face it, if we were to do a poll right now, are you more interested in knowing what happens at offensive line for Iowa or Iowa versus Indiana basketball? Iowa football is still going to win. I mean, it's really a changing of the guard. I think, if anything, this has added more interest and intrigue to football. It may be crazy and it may be too far gone, but it's like adding free agency to the NFL. I mean, the draft gets bigger ratings than the NBA playoffs. And that's probably the same way here. Is player acquisition is more interesting to people than the sports themselves in some cases.
And I'm sure we'll have more to talk about next week in that regard and much more. We'll look back at some of the basketball that we talked about today. We'll see how Iowa wrestling does dual-wise this weekend against Illinois and Purdue. Iowa women's basketball with a nationally televised game Saturday against Michigan. Plenty to talk about next week and throughout the winter to get you guys through the cold months and then into the spring. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors. Thanks to the guys. Shout out to the folks in the chat room arguing. We appreciate you. And we'll be back to talk to you next week on the Hawk Fanatic Hawkeye Hotspot. Say goodbye, Scott.
Bye, Scott.